Tri-City Sports now. Favorite topic to talk about, baseball. I might get a little sour on it sometimes because baseball does lend itself. And we discuss sometimes how baseball has changed, and do we like some of the changes? There are some that I do, some that I don't. But I always love to talk about it, and I always love to talk about it with someone who is enthusiastic about the sport as I am. That's Josh Brown of Knockahoma. He said, I kind of, lament some changes, but I'm still high on it. Now, maybe I didn't present myself there, but at the best game going, and Josh Brown, the Atlanta Braves, they did something I think that was in their best interest. They, again, just like they did Acuna, they signed Ozzie Albies to a real long-term contract that'll keep him in the fold really throughout his prime. What did you think about the free agent signing of Albies?
Obviously, it's fantastic. It's a great thing for Braves fans to have him and Acuna locked up for a long time. I do have an issue with a lot of the takes going around, like Sports Illustrated and so many thought leaders and writers basically painting this as just an insultingly low deal and all that. I think it's fantastic. I hope it's a trend. I think what we're seeing, an intelligent GM at Alex Anthopoulos giving out small. Bob Nightingale came out earlier today and said that a year ago Ozzie Albies signed for so much more money than Ozzie Albies did. Well, that's not to say that Ozzie Albies is dumb or his agent's bad or the Braves are bad. That's to say, in my opinion, that the less stupid guaranteed money has been given out to baseball players. And so I think it's great. It's a low. When it came out, I thought that everybody. I don't think it's insulting. I don't think it's brutal. I think it's the correct thing to do. I hope it's a trend.
Well, I know that a generation ago, now not to the extent of these deals with Albies and Acuna, but time losers, but they signed up a lot of their young stars for several years, and they were a perennial playoff team, or at least a perennial contender. Indians hadn't been doing that in a long time, but they had secured their big name players, the Carlos Baergas and the Manny Ramirez's, to long-term contracts, and it worked well for them, although they didn't win the World Series, as I'm sure you know, certainly in 1995, but they, again, stayed on top. So I look at this as a simple, longer contracts, but again, it keeps you in your prime and all this. I sort of scratch my head, and people not looking at this, looking at it like, it's the ball player's duty to get every last thing he can in a contract, and not necessarily, and I understand. I mean, we want to make our places of work, but when you look at things like how he's himself with one team, and that's sort of an identity, I really do think that helps the baseball player going forward. I think that, the fact that you can't really say Manny Machado is a blank, Padre, Oriole, Dodger. A Philly has been there for a month. I mean, what's the big deal? Nash, I think that has hurt the game. And there isn't the association of player to fan that comes about when you have it with a team. It's all like it's just all about fantasy leagues. And,
absolutely.
I think that that's one of the things that we're not getting. And I think that if you look at it, to associate player with team can only help. I just go on that young players' contract extensions like this are snuff contracts. Didn't he just sign a dozen-year contract for his client Harper with the Phillies? I mean, was that a snuff contract?
Yeah, and Nightingale and John Heyman about the players' side because they want to have access to these guys. They want to have. They want Boris to be the first guy. They want to be the first guy that Boris texts when stuff goes down, right?
Mm-hmm.
For the last 20 years, these guys have been paid stupid contracts. There's a huge risk involved, right? Ronald Acuna, I think, has all the potential in the world to outperform that $100 million contract. But it's also giving a guy guaranteed service time. We think he's going to be fantastic, but that's a lot of money. Ozzie Albies, I think Albies is fantastic. I think he's going to be a future, just perennial all-star, going forward like he was last year. But again, it's hard baseball. You know, yeah. If you want to level the playing field, if you want these guys to make as much money as the owners, baseball, start a sports franchise. I'm sure it's easy. Conversation with people who think that way.
No,
I'm talking about an industry that pays the worst of the worst, $560 a year.
Yeah.
Right. It's insane. These guys are paid handsomely. We can talk about minor league pay. But we cannot talk about.
I would argue that if you want to, the guys, the multi-million players, that works against the Appalachian League player or the Carolina League player or something in terms of what salary he can get. And since the minor league player is not represented by a union, do not ask me why. Then they go out into, and the players' union it becomes is not necessarily in the interest of the thing, but they are more interested in getting the most money, basically expanding the payrolls as much as they can en masse. Yeah. And so often, go back to the Indians. I remember when Jim Thome became a free agent, he really didn't want to leave Cleveland. But he was really pushed to by the look, you have to because you will go and you'll get this huge contract and that will push all of your brethren. You'll be doing it for every baseball player. If the Phillies, who ultimately signed him, pay you more than what the Indians do, it creates a system in which the baseball player ultimately is paid more. Hence, he goes to the Phillies. Okay. But there's also something that Phil Garner once said on my first rendition of this show more than 20 years ago, and it's that the pay scale is based on what the worst player who makes the most receives. And is that, good for the long term?
I don't know. I say, too, that probably aren't very popular. I think most people think they need to get paid more. I don't know. Because the thing...
I was in the independent minors, and we had guys making $600 a month, and then they were telling them, no, we can't pay you this week. And so that's absolutely atrocious, and they never carry for that. Yeah. But and I would suggest to you that I do know they get, the big bonus, and they say, hey, maybe we ought to put some of that in the bank. And however, I do think, for one thing,
I agree.
I'll say this. If Jeff Reed, I guess, fell in love through some sort of stop with Elizabeth in Tennessee and moved here, Josh, but spending capital to someone away from home for the first time and such, that you might actually see more of that in the minor league towns and such tax than you do now, where what do the ball players have to do, really, but go get a hamburger and go back to their apartment or their host family or wherever. So, and
especially the lower leagues, like the rookie ball to high A, I think that the base pay should go up, but I don't think, I see a lot of takes out there that's minimum 35 a year, 40 a year. I don't think so. Because I kind of view, and maybe this is ignorant of me, okay, but I kind of view, in a way, minor league ball almost like going to college. Basically getting a degree in your field, right? And you're getting paid to do that. And the reward, if you're good, if you make it, it's so good. The reward is so amazing. You're going to go into a field where the worst gets paid $580 a year, and you have the potential of getting millions of dollars, right? And so the I can kind of understand a seasonal kind of deal, but I'll agree with you. I do think that lower ball and at the forefront of some of their thinking, because I've been in the clubhouse in Rome, Georgia. I mean, I'm telling you, before a game, these guys are potential world-class athletes, and they're getting fed Little Caesar's pizza.
Peanut butter and jelly, that's a big thing, and they do it to cut costs, and it's, you hear the spread and all that. No, in fact, that there was, when I worked in showcase baseball, that was one of the things people wanted to know. What do you feed the players? Is it peanut butter and jelly? Is it a legitimate meal and all that? So that was a big thing. And yeah, we ate it too, myself. I mean, believe me, corners were cut, that sort of thing. So anyway, and I want to say, I've always been upset with the concept of the host family. Here we go. We're a $1 billion company here, and the good people of Kingsport, Tennessee, have to house our players. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense to me, and all that you're, you're literally making your ball players homeless and having them and you know what these host families are doing? They're feeding them. They're putting them a millionaire. Hey, remember us in retirement? Where, having a apartment building or a hotel that you rent out for X amount of time, 3 months out of the year in Kingsport, and then, you do that. I just don't see why that isn't done by $1 billion companies. And, and what it would help also in our economy, if you will, that, if you had the Minnesota in Elizabethton, or taking a $1 motel. I mean, you tell me. I think that would be the way to go, and a way to say thank you to the cities that are hosting these teams and all that.
Yeah, I think I know the Braves do that on Rome. I'm buddies with Matt Marksberry, who got called up. He made the show. He got injured bad. I think he only had a few innings, but he's trying to make his way back. But he was telling me that they put him up and several other players in apartments in Rome. He actually was my next. I don't know if the Braves do that across the board, but I do know it's unusual. I don't think most franchises do that.
The Cardinals here in Johnson City, I know they go and they put the call out for host families, but I know historically they did have an apartment building, and they also had, this motel doesn't exist anymore, but if people remember the Fox Motel, it's been changed to a different name. They used to put their Spanish players at the Fox Motel over on 11E on the way to Jonesboro, if anybody is curious. That was back in the 90s, but anyway, this is, all right, the Mets. That's who the Braves are playing this weekend. I got to cut this short because I got a basketball coach warming up in a bullpen, and he's steaming right now. But I want to ask you, what should we look forward to with the Braves and the Mets?
The Mets are good. They're a lot better than they were last year. So they're healthy. They're looking good, strong. When your number 4 guy is Steven Matz, then you got your work cut out for you. So, hey, it'll tell a lot about the Atlanta Braves going out of this series.
Well, Kyle Wright goes for his first victory of the season, the Braves' first-round pick 2 years ago in this game. So that's something to look for tonight. And I'll tell you this one thing. You can talk about the contracts, but I don't think it really hurt Acuna in the short run, with this 450-foot dinger that he hit this week. So, he seemed to like his contract just fine. Yes, Greg Gary, new Mercer basketball coach. He'll join me next. Tri-City Sports Now.